Hey, John.
Hello, Fred.
How you doing, bud? How about a hug?
A hug is good.
All right, man.
Let's go.
Welcome once again to another episode of Fred and John Talks. Today, the title of our talk is going to be Supermen of Connections. Wish we didn't have our shirt on. We could show our muscles.
We don't want to embarrass our viewers.
And we're going to have a discussion today. The title, Supermen of Connections, will make sense as we go along. But let's get started.
You know, straight off, I'm going to give a shout out to Jo Cox, who's a member of Parliament. She's now deceased.
In the UK.
In the United Kingdom.
Oh, is she deceased?
She's deceased,
Okay.
yes. But she started in 2017 and 18 in the British government, a minister of loneliness.
Yeah.
And she helped Parliament vote and decide on making loneliness a topic throughout the whole country, through all their governmental departments.
Yeah.
The first country in the world to do that.
A true trailblazer.
Oh, trailblazer.
A superwoman.
A superwoman, absolutely. So don't think that we're the only important people in the world,
Right.
You and me.
Right.
Another thing I want to bring up that impressed me in the last few weeks doing some research on this talk is our own U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. I realized that he wrote a book in 2020 called The Human Power of Human Connections in a Sometimes Lonely World. Now, he wrote that in 2020, and he became the first Surgeon General. I think the first time he served he was the 19th Surgeon General. Now he's the 21st Surgeon General. So he served two administrations. And in May of 2023, he wrote about how America is suffering from
Epidemic.
Yeah, it's a
Of
healthcare
loneliness.
advisory.
And for our listening audience, you know, we have done a lot of videos and we'll do more
Absolutely.
about loneliness because, as you're going to fill in our audience, it's not only 4 or 5 countries.
No, it's the whole world because the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually declared in 2023 that there is a global public health concern about loneliness. So almost 6,000 odd public health service officers that work with the WHO are working on this countrywide throughout the world. So it's a very, very big deal. One of the things that impressed me about Surgeon General Murthy is that he likens loneliness as a cue, like a need. It's something that you or I or an individual picks up on and decides, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I'm lonely.
Yeah, like your stomach's rumbling and
Yes.
that's a cue that it's
Yes.
time to eat.
Yes. And even though it's a universal feeling, if it becomes a persistent, problematic feeling and you become somewhat isolated with it, then you want to fulfill that need and take care of it.
And if you're hungry all the time, what that translates into, you're starving.
Yes, you're starving.
And if you're hungry for human connection all the time, you are starving from being alone and being lonely.
Well, and being emotionally alone, personally alone, and isolated, if you wind up that way, leads to alcoholism, drug abuse, and now we know
all manner of problems. Now we know what? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Well, the health concerns now become legion.
Oh, yes.
With high blood pressure, stroke.
Physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual.
Spiritual.
As Christians and both of us who are in Christian circles, my 32 years of counseling, Christians are not immune to loneliness. They suffer it just as much as people who are secular and non-religious.
Well, and during the pandemic, I think many Christians stopped going to church for multiple reasons, and some of them have yet to return.
I may have said before on our program that right after I got separated 8 years ago and then ultimately divorced, it was extremely painful for me to go to church alone, because for 24 years I went with my wife, and then of course when my 3 children came along, and it was one of the loneliest hours I spent of the week going to Mass.
Even though you were there.
Yeah, I was there alone.
Yeah, right.
Without my family.
Yeah. But you were with other people. But
even though I was with other people.
Yes.
Well, you could be loneliness in a crowd.
In a crowd. So it often comes down to how can you fulfill that need, and what Murphy seems to indicate in his book is that you need to find people that you can be open with, and that's not easy. To be open with and to feel vulnerable. That's another...
Especially for men.
For men. And as a counselor, I'm sure in your work you've seen couples where one doesn't want to be vulnerable with the other, or they can't be vulnerable, or if they're just a single person, they're vulnerable, they have lack of self-esteem, and they don't want to be put out there and work and be made fun of.
In addition to the saying, you could be loneliest in a crowd, you could be loneliest in a marriage.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you see that.
I've seen that for 32 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I'm seeing and thinking about all this, Fred, and we've been through some other sessions with loneliness, is that part of the healing and the cure is dialogue, which is what you and I are doing.
Yes.
So,
does that make us Supermen of Connections? There you go.
You're quick. Fred, you and I are helping with this cure.
Yeah.
That's actually, when you go back and watch our first video.
Yeah, our introduction video.
Where we talk about connections, relationships, talking to one another, giving people a hug, trying to lift them up. I think inadvertently, we weren't thinking about it at the time, but we're hopefully serving our YouTube public and viewers.
We couldn't have seen how it was going to unfold, but we spelled it out right from the beginning that the reason why we started the channel was because of our deep-seated belief in the importance and necessity of close friends, having close friends.
Yes, absolutely. When I was doing my practice of medicine, I'm now retired, but when I was doing my practice of medicine, and I only did gynecology, so I only practiced counseling women. It's only occurred to me over the years since I've quit practicing, Fred, that I realized when I was sitting on this side of the desk and they're on the other side of the desk, that I'm only having an impact on one-on-one. Now, maybe I was having an impact on the family with the kids, with my patient and the kids, and maybe an impact on her and her husband or her significant other.
Her and her friends.
Her and her friends.
Her and her family of origin.
There many times a patient would come in repetitively, and I began to get the feeling that they didn't just have a physical ailment, that they had some needs.
So it can be said that even though you did a lot of this work on a one-to-one basis, it had like a domino, could have had like a domino effect in her life.
Correct. Well, you used to talk about the men's group that you did.
I was just going to bring that up. In 32 years of practice, and just to recap, I do about 50% mental health counseling with individuals and 50% couples counseling. But the most powerful and effective experience I ever had in all my years of being a therapist was when I started and facilitated a men's support group that lasted 8 years. And again, to recap, we met every other Saturday for an hour and a half for 8 years. We went on this was a Christian men's support group. We went on 2 retreats, like for the weekend, a year, one in the winter, one in the summer. The guys got together and made friends outside. They socialized. They went to ball games. They went to out for and met for breakfast. They went to entertainment venues. It wasn't only in the Saturday meetings. And I will tack on to that before I hand it back over to you. Over the 8 years, hundreds, it might have even reached 1,000. Hundreds of men came and went from that group. That is to say, while there was a core group of guys who came pretty much from the very beginning and stayed all 8 years, I would say there's about 10 of them. There were hundreds and hundreds of guys who came and stayed. Some came for one session, it wasn't for them, they never came back. Others came for 4 or 5 meetings, got what they needed and never came back, and everything in between. But that talk about having an effect that spread out. So you're talking hundreds of guys, and how did that then help improve their connections outside of the group?
It's a multiplier effect.
It's a multiplier. It's a domino effect.
It's a domino effect where their friends were influenced, and they influenced a friend perhaps. And then perhaps the connections that were forming outside of the group.
Yes.
When they went out for a meal, went to a movie.
Yes.
All that was very important.
I remember 2 guys. I remember 2 instances. I won't tell long stories about this, but 2 instances where these guys made an instant connection. In one case, these 2 guys were both into motorcycles. They were motorcycle freaks.
Okay.
And they ended up friends outside the group. And another one, both of them were musicians, and they got together to jam and stuff like that.
There you go.
It was just, again, in all my 32 years of counseling, that was the most impactful way of making connections I've ever experienced.
Well, we hope that those who are watching us on the YouTube, that we get multiple subscribers and we get multiple viewers, and we hope to have an impact on people who are watching us and maybe stimulate them, maybe influence them, maybe empower them to do something different if they have that need, if they feel that cue. By the way, what do you think? Do you think we're influencers, Fred, or do you think we are empowering people with what we do?
I would go with empowering people. Influencers to me has a couple negative connotations, which I won't spell out, but empowering people. You talked about doing that in your gynecology practice.
Yes.
I do it when I counsel a person one-to-one. You're empowering them because they're looking to make improvements in their lives, and oftentimes it's about connection, whether it's creating a better marriage or it's they have no friends or they have few friends and they want to expand their circle of connection and so what we call their support system. So I'd call that empowering them to go out. And I think that's what we're doing here. But I need to ask you a question, and that is, please continue in terms of, because you've done a lot more research on this than I have in the technical sense of reading articles, books. You've cited these books. You've cited the Surgeon General put out a document and everything. I have it at home. But where do you want to go from here in our discussion?
I think that the whole issue boils down to connections with people, and it can be through sport. It can be through certain things that you are inspired to do. I think you discovered going fishing was satisfying.
Yes.
And you didn't have somebody else with you, but you sought out to do something that inspired you. I play pickleball because there are automatic connections there with people several times a week. I don't have to call them. Right. I don't have to social media text them. Yep. They just turn up because it's a common communal thing that we do. I've often thought that in communities that are retirement communities, that connections are sometimes ready-made there for them because they will have walking groups, they'll have reading groups, recreation groups,
exercise
book
clubs, prayer groups.
So that is a help for those people who live in maybe retirement communities. But there are a lot of other possibilities if people check out their county and city facilities, because their county recreational services are probably available for them.
I get emails from Frederick County Parks and Rec about the events that are going on
Here in Virginia.
And I just wanted to throw in that in my little corner of the world. Now, my men's group, that ended in 2012. It went from 2004 to 2012. But I and a lot of other guys have resurrected getting together. We have a men's group. You're on the list, and you've been to the... And we do fire pit nights.
Fire pit night. It's
Those
great.
are very powerful nights of connection.
Yes. And the warmth of a fire now in February is very helpful.
Yes. But the real warmth comes from seeing guys interact and talk about personal things, not just sports, politics, work, and their hobby, and their golf game.
Not just the Super Bowl coming up or something.
And similar to my men's group of old, there's always new guys coming and going. There was a new guy who attended the last one. I know you couldn't be there. You were under the weather. And our next one is coming up February. It's a Saturday, last Saturday in February. And this guy who came for the first time, he answered the broadcast email and he said, "Count me in." He loved it.
Good. So he'll be back.
He'll be back.
Several years ago, Fred, I think I asked you to check out a movie that was called Searching for Angela Shelton. When I was actively practicing in gynecology and my wife was nursing at the time with me, we saw this article in our local paper here in Winchester. We have Shenandoah University here in our town. And they have a very strong women's community in the whole university. And women, they have actually a school or a division of women's studies. It's a very powerful school. And they invited Angela Shelton to come and speak. And so I had really no knowledge about this individual. But the more I learned about her and I've read about her and I've kind of followed her since I think 2010 or 11 when she visited Winchester, Virginia, and she gave a talk in one of the auditoriums. And before the talk and after the talk, she put this movie out that she had made back in 2004.
The documentary.
The documentary. It was her first movie that she'd ever made. A very ambitious.
And it was called?
Searching for Angela Shelton.
Searching for Angela Shelton.
Yes. Very interesting proposition, Fred. She took a motorhome, a small motorhome, and a film crew, and this went on for many months, where she went around the country, the United States, to various states, after she had done some research on where Angela Sheltons live, where other Angela Sheltons live.
How clever.
Where other women whose name was Angela Shelton.
Good thing it wasn't a guy who was looking for John Smith. He would have been doing it for the rest of his life.
Right, exactly. An exhaustive list.
Yeah.
It was quite fascinating to watch her talk about this and then to watch the film. And she explained before the film that she contacted each and every one of them that she could get a hold of. And some didn't want to be interviewed, and some of them didn't want to be filmed. But I would advise our viewers, if they've not heard of this individual, Angela Shelton, who's still going today with, I think, a social media hook called Stirring Up Trouble. But if you look up Angela Shelton, she has several things going on. She's
Stirring Up Trouble.
Yeah, Stirring Up Trouble.
She's a mover and a shaker.
She's a mover and a shaker. Yeah. I mean, she's into music and records and movies, and she's also kind of a self-made counselor and influencer, or
the female version of Dr. Phil.
Yeah, Dr. Phil on steroids. Yeah, on steroids. No, she's a very interesting person, and I've followed this individual. I would say, whenever you and I have talked off camera before about the most interesting people we've ever met, she would be one of the most interesting people I've ever met, talked to face, and then followed her career since 2010 or 11 when she was in Winchester.
Talked to her face to face because you went to hear her talk.
Went to hear her talk.
And then you went and had a chat with her?
Yes, I did.
Fascinating.
Very impressed because at first she was female and I was a gynecologist.
Yeah.
And the whole topic of Searching for Angela Shelton is that she discovers over interviewing these women that 70% of them were victims of childhood sexual abuse or domestic violence.
As was she.
As was she, yes. So here's an example of somebody who had a very tough upbringing, very isolated. Her father kind of rejected her and rejected the notion that he had played any role in being abusive to her. She makes her own way in the world, and now she's become a very prominent individual in trying to empower others. So the product of this individual and her loneliness, isolation, and abuse has come back to help countless others, thousands of people probably. She has a lot of people who follow her on social media.
You gotta love stories like that.
Yes.
Where a person who, went through such a hardship and pain as a child grows up, and we in therapy we call them survivors.
Yes.
But I also call them thrivers and victors.
Okay. Well, that's true.
Because they overcome their childhood abuse.
And through certain people and other things, I guess, that empower them. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine how somebody becomes empowered enough to take the initiative to throw off and cast off all those negative things.
That, to me, takes me back to my sports playing days, baseball, basketball, and football, when our coaches used to say, they used to emphasize intestinal fortitude.
Right.
Intestinal fortitude.
From the gut.
You got to be tough from inside.
Yes, tough from inside. Well, one of the things that's been the product of her career thus far is that she started rape crisis centers, childhood advocacy centers. She does a music career, kind of an online counseling or empowerment career whenever you stay in touch with her.
I'd like to meet this woman.
Yeah, she's an interesting young...
Where is she based out of? Or is she still trucking around in her mobile home?
Sometimes I see postings from Tennessee and the South. I think she's originally a South Carolina girl.
Okay.
But one of the last episodes of her original film in 2004 is she goes all the way back to the doorsteps and the porch of her home, where her father still is, still living, and she confronts him.
I'm afraid I know what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, he basically is still...
He was unrepentant.
Unrepentant and denying the situation. And I think it's a very sad thing when you see the film, because she was hoping and expecting, after all these visits and after all these people, after all these miles and all these individuals she talked with, that she was more empowered to come back and talk to Dad, and yet he just couldn't bring himself to...
That's very sad.
It is sad. But that's probably the crux of what I wanted to get into today, Fred. I don't want our viewers to think we're the only Supermen of Connections, though we are promoting Connections. We're promoting you to become a subscriber and to be a viewer and to broadcast to your friends and let them know about us. We think we're having an impact on people.
And I think, we've taken it to the next level today in the fact that you cited the WHO.
Yes.
Can you say that again for our listening audience?
WHO last year...
Which is the World
Health Organization, which has roughly 6,000 public health servants involved worldwide, has declared loneliness as a global health concern.
Now think about that. We started with citing what's been going on in the UK, thanks to Joe Cox.
Yes.
Japan got on board with the UK. You've told me that Australia is
talking about Australia.
The Australian government is looking into doing things about it. Then
Scandinavian countries.
Yep. Then in my home state of Connecticut, you had politicians who are aware of and trying to do something about the epidemic of loneliness.
The first state of the Union.
The first state of the Union.
Yeah.
Then there was a second state that
jumped
on the bandwagon.
One of the politicians is from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. But now we've taken it to the next level. You're talking about the WHO saying this is a
Yes.
global epidemic.
Yes.
And I have to throw in that from a mental health standpoint, and a personal, this really dovetails with each other. As horrible as it is, I call it a curse, to be born with a genetic predisposition to mental illness. It is horrible. There's no denying that. But chronic loneliness, and as we alluded to before, the medical profession, the psychiatric profession, all bear witness to this. Chronic loneliness is it's a killer.
Yes.
It cuts years off your life.
Premature death.
Even if you live long in misery.
Yes.
You live long in suffering. Because there's no pill for loneliness. People with mental health problems now have the advantage of having good medication to manage their mental illnesses.
Yes.
There's no pill for loneliness. The remedy for loneliness is the title of our talk today.
Yeah.
Supermen of Connection.
Connections. In any form, one person, two persons, a counseling group, find connections out there. And I think my last plea is that since Connecticut has become the first state of the Union to address it and start having meetings and roundtables about it in their community in Connecticut, is where's Virginia? We're now lobbying for Virginia. We're from Virginia, and we want Virginia to be at least the second state in the Union to start addressing this and try and get the stigma lowered and get conversation flowing on a more maybe governmental level, governmental influence.
And I want to put out a shout out as we wind down too to something I've mentioned before. It was an old bumper sticker. I haven't seen one in years, sadly, because I think it still applies. And that was think globally, act locally. And I want to put a shout out to our viewers.
Yes.
Like we've done in our little corner of the world, you and your practice, me and my practice, and in my men's group, and in this fire pit group, act locally, reach out. Don't stay in your house just watching television if you're lonely. You have to come out of your comfort zone, even if it's inch by inch. I don't advocate, especially for extremely introverted people, shy people, people with social anxiety, that you try to go out and conquer the world overnight, but take small steps, baby steps, toward making connections.
Meet your neighbor. Just go next door and meet
start
your
with
neighbor.
your neighbor. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that's enough for our viewers to chew on today, and get back with us. Let us know what your thoughts are. We always like to pay attention to what you're saying in the comments section, and pass on the information to somebody else about watching our YouTube on loneliness or any of the other YouTube videos we've made about a lot of other topics.
Yes, sir.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Okay, bud.
Okay. Ciao. You want to?
Yeah, turn it off.
Yeah.